Cobb TV. Watch your life make sense.
I'm doing the applied genetic engineering studies to generate new version of drugs and pharmaceutical preparation to cure a lot of dangerous diseases. I also have to try as a human being to understand the meaning of life as much as I can, and therefore I came to the teaching of Kabbalah with this question, so you can understand that. So practically the main question which comes to me, how you will combine this teaching with the very pragmatic and materialistic studies as genetics.
What I would like or can say is that science helps us, well, those who study Kabbalah, in the sense that it shows us that there's a limit, a boundary, and that we can't permeate the essence of life. We can know the superficial form of life, like physicists, those, studying protons and electrons and other, atomic particles. But for us, there's not such big a difference, because you deal with, those who deal with physics and biology deal with an outer form of expression of life. And so the question about the meaning of life remains for both physicists and geneticists unanswered, and they will not be able to discover it. But the good thing about science is that it brings you closer to a wall, to a boundary, and you see that there is no further progress possible, like in today's quantum physics or in geneticists. In genetics and in molecular biology. We'll get to it. And the essence of life, the meaning of life, to know that, you have to rise to a different level of research, which is really the level of substance called desire, which is the general force that exists in the world, which is a desire, and that desire is divided into still, vegetative, animate, and speaking, these degrees. And if we want to know the meaning of life, then we have to study that desire, where it comes from, how it evolves, yes, how the desire itself evolves, not the outer expressions of it, like manifestations like in atoms or molecules. And when we examine its evolution, within that evolution, we find all the answers. Why? We don't find some higher spiritual force, there is some kind of a godly image, some kind, creator who, we research. In the study of Kabbalah, in the teaching of Kabbalah, you research, like in physics. You had a person who started this physics thousands of years ago, and following him, every generation accumulated information, and that created a science. The same applies for biology or genetics, which is relatively new science. It's the same. We gather information and advance accordingly. And the same happens in Kabbalah. There's no difference. No book drops from above, and no one gets any kind of, revelation in his ear. Nothing happens from above. It's the research in the same way as done in contemporary ordinary science. But what is the difference? We're studying a different substance, not the atoms or molecules, like in quantum physics or genetics, but we study desires. And then we have a problem. How do you research a desire? And here comes the wisdom of Kabbalah. And first of all, it builds within us, in each of us, those who want to be scientists. First, you have to develop within you a special instrument to reach that substance called desire. It's not psychology. You need to penetrate the desire and see how it changes, and what are those changes in it as it evolves from the beginning of its creation to the end of its creation. And that's how, in this research, we come to a force which is called Creator. It's all within that desire. Let's say you were studying, your living material, organism, yes. And in between those acids and molecules and whatnot, deeper and deeper in you'd research until you found the initial primordial force, which is first of all common to everything because it's the basis of all materials. It controls everything because it sustains creation, the whole of it. And from that force emerges everything. The Mendeleev, the table the Mendeleev table and all the biological and chemical forms, and it takes them through all the forms of evolution from the very beginning, where you see that force existed first, and from it material began to evolve. Yes, a desire, and the desire evolves into all kinds of forms, and you see, the more you delve into it, you see the end of its development, and everything emerges from that science which is called Kabbalah.
Genetical material, it's a very stable thing. It's passed through generation, and we're practically having the verses, the code, the book of how we are built and the whole life is built, all the forms, written, millions of years ago. And with all the progress or evolution, as we call it, it's still the same. So it was given, it was written, it was a kind of assembled, and it's a very complex one. We are just at the very beginning of unraveling actually what it is, how it's written. So with all that, I'm asking the question why only human beings are given with this gift of reaching the level of spirituality. Is it in the genetical code? Is it given to us, or it's imprinted later on when we're already born? Or we are still the animals? I will probably...
How are we different from animals?
That's exactly, we are not. Genetically, we are not. So spirituality is imprinted on us later on. Exactly.
The more you delve into genetics, you won't find any human being there, but an animal.
But why only human beings?
Not the human in us. The human in us is not the beast. It's not the animal.
Absolutely.
That's why genetics isn't studying it.
Amazingly, through all these thousands, millions of years as a species, so we probably exist, at least with a new concept, several millions of years, probably even tens of millions of years, we didn't change. As human beings, we're the same. But spiritually, we are growing, and otherwise, why we will be here, right? Exactly. You see, and with this evolvement, is it in our genetical code? Is it somehow remains? Once you pass through from egoism to altruism and probably reaching the high levels of spirituality, is it somehow getting back on our genetical code imprinted? Can we pass it on? That is an interesting thing I don't understand yet. You see the point?
Well, that's an interesting question, but the answer is simple to it, really. We're animals. We don't change. What changes is only the human in us. Either the corporeal human, as we acquire information about our world, and our egos evolve more. It's our egos that evolve, not the animal in us. Well, the animal does evolve to an extent, but the main thing that evolves is the human in us, but in a bad way. From generation to generation, our egos are growing. But the question is, in one of the moments of our evolution, something happens to us. Even though we remain animals, and even though we remain people in this world, all of a sudden a desire appears in us, some kind of piece of information which I call, it's like a spiritual gene or genetic element, like a spiritual code maybe, which begins our spiritual life, our new life. And so beyond having our current life, the one that you're studying, a new form of life. It begins within us, a spiritual one, on a different dimension. Above this, animate and the vegetative animate.
That's an interesting theory because, you know, with this spiritual gene, it means, and that's what actually I've heard this before, at least the term, and the point is that still this spiritual development, is it only individual can do that once they reach a certain age and, let's say, not curiosity, but understanding that it's that important. But it's not passed through generation to generation. We teach individual to ask this question, actually. You know, it's not passed through the genes, even though you think that we have some spiritual gene in us. Otherwise, why we would be coming to that more and more? So the people somehow getting this bug sitting in us, provoking us to reach this level and to try to answer the question. Otherwise, we would be animals, as all the other animals on this planet.
Well, yes, for now we're animals. As long as a person doesn't have the question about the meaning of life, which emerges as a result of the spiritual gene, it's not a result of just being, you know, of just suffering in life and you want to succeed more. But if you're asking about a different form, a different level of life, that's the new gene speaking in you. But if you don't have it, you're still an animal, not a person.
So it's individual work after all. So we have to work, all of us.
Well, yeah, but in the end, all of us come to that level of development where we begin to ask this question, what life is for, what's the secret of life, when we ask about a different level of development, the spiritual level, and it has nothing to do with our current development in our corporeal level. So genetics will remain and will not change, and it will study more, just like quantum physics. It will all, in the end, see that there is something beyond matter, but what? They will not be able to discover. Because for that, you need new instruments.